The modern medical system is amazing. Clean medical equipment, disease and illness treated with scientifically backed processes, and the doctors actually care about you. Before the sanitary revolution of the 1800s that encouraged scientific treatment and professionalism, sanitation was negligible, a lack of scientific knowledge leading to all sorts of ineffective treatment. However, this begs the question, what allowed for this transition? What do we need to make people realize the need to wash their hands before helping someone deliver? Well, the most important aspects that constitute a scientific turning point are 1. A new discovery backed by scientific evidence and or previous discoveries that either topples an old one or develops a previous one. 2. The effective communication with your peers and the public of why a new discovery is so groundbreaking. And 3. Support of the discovery from peers and effective demonstration of application and how each step in the execution connects to the concept. With this in mind, we should first try to understand the medical field during the early 1800s. At the advent of European industrialization, many less scientific medicinal practices and theories were still popular. Theories like miasma theory, which stated that batter was the cause of disease, and humor theory, which claimed that illness was caused by an imbalance of body fluids, were still prevalent theories at the time. These insufficient theories were especially problematic during the Industrial Revolution, as public health conditions were absolutely horrendous. During the sanitation revolution of the late 19th century, the three core aspects of discovery, communication, and peer support initiated the successful propagation and acceptance of germ theory, allowed for the development of applications to the medical world, and paved the way for modern healthcare and sanitation. Semmelweis, our first scientist, worked as an assistant at the Vienna General Hospital's obstetrical clinic. This clinic helped mothers with poverty and illegitimacy difficulties with childbirth. There were two maternity clinics in the hospital. While the first clinic suffered severely with puerperal fever, with a mortality rate of about 10%, the second had a considerably lower mortality rate, averaging less than 4%. In many cases, mothers preferred to give birth on the street, what is known as street births, instead of giving birth in the first maternity clinic. Surprisingly though, puerperal fever was rare among those giving street births. Semmelweis describes his observation of these street births. To me, it appeared logical that patients who experienced street births would become ill at least as frequently as those who delivered in the clinic. What protected those who delivered outside the clinic from these unknown endemic influences? After close examination over several years, Semmelweis, in 1847, finally concluded that cadaverous and decaying material caused puerperal fever through how a good friend of his died of an infection after getting cut while performing an autopsy. The first clinic saw higher puerperal fever death rates because medical students that trained there performed autopsies and then immediately went to deliver babies, while the second clinic composed almost exclusively of midwives. Semmelweis immediately instituted chlorine hand washing to get rid of these cadaverous particles, and the death rates in the first clinic within a year dropped from around 20% to 2%. However, despite Semmelweis' achievement of saving countless lives through hospital hygiene, Semmelweis was ridiculed by most of his colleagues and was largely rejected by the medical community at large. While his discovery was one that was groundbreaking and while he was able to support it with real experimental data, he wasn't able to back it up with scientific evidence. He wasn't able to prove his claim that all infections were due to cadaverous particles with only data from the clinic, even though infections stem from other sources as well. As Semmelweis wasn't a prominent voice in the medical field, a lack of factual backing for his discoveries discredited his discovery. Therefore, as more authoritative, prominent voices at the time, such as the celebrated German physician Rudolf Virchow, opposed Semmelweis' findings, few sided with Semmelweis. Further complicating the matter, Semmelweis was unable to effectively communicate his findings to the medical community, publishing it 10 years after the discovery, initially believing that he didn't have to as long as he spread it through demonstrating to the other medical students at the hospital. So by the time of his publishing, most people already had an erroneous understanding of his ideas. Most of these circumstances were equally present among other doctors and scientists of this build-up towards the sanitary revolution, not just Semmelweis, with a lack of scientific proof and widespread demonstration of its effects, preventing any significant change in the understanding of sanitation. Semmelweis may not have met all the requirements for a turning point himself. However, his work highlighted the critical issues surrounding sanitation and sparked further investigations by other doctors and scientists. So who, in the end, is going to make doctors clean blood from their hands before performing any operation? Louis Pasteur, a chemistry professor at the University of Lille, was researching the cause of souring in milk and wine. Pasteur proved that wine souring could be caused by microorganisms. After further experimentation on fermentation, Pasteur found that sterilized beverages had no signs of souring, indicating that microbes caused fermentation. This ran contrary to another prevalent theory at the time, spontaneous generation, which stated that organisms spontaneously appeared from non-living things. Pasteur disproved the theory of spontaneous generation through an experiment in which he exposed purified water to different environments and observed that no life spontaneously generated when the flask is covered. This suggests that the only way that microorganisms spread was from location to location. Then, in a stroke of genius, Pasteur came to the realization that diseases could also be caused by microorganisms. The final piece of germ theory came from a physical image of the germs themselves, which he isolated from 6 silkworms. And there it was, microorganisms, the causing agent of disease, right before everyone's eyes. Pasteur's discovery immediately became the focal point of the scientific field's attention, attracting many scientists to investigate further. Within 2 decades after Pasteur's isolation of germs, Robert Koch successfully isolated the causing agent of anthrax and tuberculosis, further solidifying Pasteur's discovery. But why? Why was Pasteur successful when others before him weren't? Pasteur's germ theory was backed by much scientific evidence, the proof that fermentation was caused by microbes, the refutation of the prevalent theory of spontaneous generation, and the isolation of disease-causing microorganisms in silkworms under the microscope. Pasteur also effectively communicated his discovery. There was already much attention on the subject because there was a huge debate between Pasteur, who was already renowned for his research in fermentation at the time, and Félix Archimede Pouchet on the subject of spontaneous generation. The French Academy of Sciences offered the Alhumbert Prize to whoever could prove or disprove the doctrine through experiments, and he was therefore able to make several presentations before the French Academy of Sciences in 1881. Now, that was all well and good. However, Pasteur still needed to meet the last criteria. That is, he needed someone to apply and demonstrate his newly conjured theory. He knew that the implications of his work in medicine had immense potential. However, as a chemist, his field of expertise wasn't in the field of medicine, and he wouldn't have the knowledge for its application. He even said himself that, "I do not forget that medicine and veterinary practice are foreign to me. I desire judgment and criticism on all my contributions." For this reason, he actively sought collaboration, critique, and called for the application of this in the medical field by those who were better versed in that area than he was. One notable propagator, demonstrator, and collaborator with the theoretical fields regarding antiseptic use in surgery was Joseph Lister. Similarly to Semmelweis, Lister had long realized how many patients died after surgery arbitrarily due to infection of wounds, and was already pondering how to solve this issue. Inspired by and working with Pasteur and other scientists, with the application of his own observations, Lister realized that as long as the infectious microorganisms were kept away from the wound, it would not be infected. In addition, making use of the developing chemical antiseptics of that time, he tried to use them to prevent the airborne bacteria from getting to the wound and infecting them, which was a resounding success, decreasing the rate of death to less than 10% compared to the previous 50 or 60%. Despite the controversy surrounding his published papers in 1867 on the role of antiseptics due to the confusion of his new principle with a new method of dressing, he didn't allow himself to get drawn into it, but instead continuously improving his method, reiterating the difference in lectures, providing specific case descriptions in papers, and actively publicizing it through public surgeries, most notably his public surgery at King's College Hospital on October 26, 1877, demonstrating the antiseptic system's potential in surgery death reduction. His papers, on the other hand, were another reason why he was such a successful propagator. As was common during his time, Lister wrote long-winded papers that demonstrated patient cases and each step in treatment. However, he made very detailed drawings and concept introductions to ensure that everyone who read it would be able to understand both the application and the concepts perfectly. He did so to such an extent that the surgeon Prigentile stated that any failures of our practice may fairly be attributed to imperfections in carrying out your rules and steps. Through his continuous efforts, he not only was able to inspire widespread acceptance of the antiseptic system through detailed steps and explanations of each step, but also construct a detailed framework on which antiseptic methods could be further developed, promoting an understanding and execution of medical professionalism. Through Pasteur's effective communication with medical professionals like Joseph Lister, germ theory was able to inspire and support new medical practices that were propagated throughout the medical field. With the benefit of hindsight, we are able to confidently say that germ theory is one of the most significant breakthroughs in science ever. Its range of applications are wide, including vaccines, equipment cleansing, antibiotics, and hospital sanitation. Germ theory is the reason that most of us are even alive today. We might take for granted knowing the causes of diseases and doctors knowing what to do to combat them, but we've seen how difficult it may be to challenge conventional belief even when backed up by data. It can be baffling for us that Semmelweis' innovative results were neglected, yet there have been countless scientists whose work have been overlooked and neglected due to prevalent postulate. Social science even has a name for that: the Semmelweis effect. Germ theory's success came not only from Pasteur's dedication, but from cooperation from the countless other scientists willing to listen, and from those who dared to experiment and apply this pristine declaration. It is important to remember that while individuals make discoveries, one can only make history while standing on the shoulders of giants.